In 1964, inside a cramped Oakland basement, 6 traditional kung fu masters sat across from a 24-year-old instructor who had just opened a school teaching non-Chinese students. They didn't come to learn, they came to shut him down. What happened in the 20 seconds that followed wasn't a fight. It was a public execution of everything they believed, and none of them ever spoke about it the same way again. Oakland, 1964. Bruce Lee's school sat on the 2nd floor of a narrow building on Broadway, above a grocery store that smelled like dried fish and incense. The sign outside read, Junfan Kung Fu Institute, in hand-painted letters. Inside, the wood floors were unpolished. The walls were bare except for a single mirror. And 3 days a week, white students practiced Wing Chun forms under the instruction of a 24-year-old Chinese man who spoke English better than Cantonese. That was the problem. In Chinatown, word traveled faster than respect. And by late autumn, the elders had heard enough. Bruce Lee wasn't just teaching kung fu to non-Chinese students. He was charging them. He was calling it his own system. And worse, he was claiming the old methods were incomplete. The letter arrived on a Thursday. It wasn't mailed. It was delivered by hand, passed through one of Bruce's Chinese students, who trained in silence and left without making eye contact. The paper was thin, formal. The message was clear. You are invited to meet with representatives of the traditional kung fu community to discuss your conduct and teaching practices. Your presence is expected. This is not optional. No signature, no location. Just a date 2 days later, and an address in the basement of a building Bruce had never entered. His wife, Linda, found him reading it at the kitchen table that night. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't look up. "An invitation," he said. "To what?" "A trial." Naratoa. Bruce had known this was coming. Not the letter specifically, but the confrontation. He'd been too visible, too vocal. In interviews with local papers, he'd said things traditional masters didn't forgive. That classical kung fu was too rigid. That forms were useless without function. That a real fighter adapted, and tradition without evolution was performance art. It wasn't arrogance, it was observation. But to men who had spent decades perfecting ancient techniques, it sounded like disrespect, and disrespect required an answer. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. No students, no witnesses from his school, just Bruce, and whoever had decided he needed to be corrected. Linda asked him if he was going. He folded the letter once, slid it into his jacket pocket, and looked at her. "If I don't," he said, "they'll say I refused, that I hid, that what I teach doesn't work when it's tested. And if you go," he smiled, but there was no humor in it, "then they'll find out." Narata. On Saturday, Bruce Lee walked alone through Chinatown, past vegetable carts and men playing Chinese chess on folding tables. No one looked at him directly, but everyone saw him. Word had spread. The young instructor was going to face the council. Some thought he was brave. Others thought he was foolish. A few thought he wouldn't come back the same way he went in. The basement door was already open when he arrived. He stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. The basement was larger than it looked from the street. Concrete floor, low ceiling, a single row of fluorescent lights running down the center, half of them flickering. The air was cool and still. No windows, one exit. 6 men sat in a loose semicircle near the back wall. They didn't stand when Bruce entered. They didn't greet him. They simply watched as he crossed the room and stopped a few feet from the nearest chair. He didn't sit. Neither did they ask him to. These were not beginners. These were Cyphers teachers who had trained for decades, men whose students called them master without irony. Hung Gar, Choi Le Fat, Northern Shaolin. Tai Chi styles that had survived wars, migrations, and centuries of refinement. Styles that predated nations, and in their silence, Bruce understood something immediately. This was not a conversation, it was a sentencing. Narata, the eldest, spoke first. His name was never recorded, but witnesses later described him as a Hung Gar instructor in his 60s, grey-haired, with hands like knotted wood. He didn't raise his voice. "You've been teaching our methods to outsiders." Bruce didn't blink. "I've been teaching what works." "That is not what we asked." "It's what I answered." The room tightened. One of the younger masters shifted forward slightly, but the elder raised a hand. Silence returned. Kung Fu is not a commodity, the elder continued. It is heritage. It belongs to our people. You dishonor that by selling it to anyone who pays. Bruce's expression didn't change. I teach people who want to learn, he said. Not people who want to collect forms like stamps. Another master spoke, a northern Shaolin stylist, younger, sharper in tone. You call yourself a Wing Chun instructor, but you teach pieces of other styles. You mix them. I respect what functions, Bruce replied. The rest is ceremony. The room went colder. Narrator Av, they had expected defiance, but they hadn't expected this calm, unapologetic clarity. No guilt, no compromise. The eldest leaned forward. If you believe your way is superior, he said slowly, then prove it. Bruce tilted his head slightly. How? A challenge match, you against one of ours. Traditional rules. No equipment. If you win, we leave your school alone. If you lose, you stop teaching non-Chinese students. Permanently. It wasn't a request. It was the only path that avoided public humiliation, for him or for them. Bruce glanced at the other 5 men. None of them moved. This had already been decided before he walked in. He looked back at the elder. Who fights? The elder gestured to his left. A man stood. His name was Wong Jack Man, Northern Shaolin, mid-20s, lean, technical, fast. He had competed in Hong Kong. He had taught in San Francisco. He was known. Wong stepped into the center of the room. Bruce looked at him for 3 seconds. Then he nodded. Now? Bruce asked. The elder's face was stone. Now? Nararad ah. There was no bell, no referee, no countdown. The 6 masters moved back toward the walls. Wong took his stance, high-bladed, hands loose and ready. Bruce stood still, feet shoulder-width apart, hands at his sides, and in the seconds before it began, the only sound in that basement was breathing. Wong Jack Man had fought before, not in basements, not in secret. He'd sparred in tournaments, demonstrated forms in exhibitions, taught advanced students in schools where tradition mattered more than innovation. His northern Shaolin lineage was clean, traceable, respected. His movements were textbook, sharp angles, crisp extensions, footwork that followed patterns refined over generations. He was everything Bruce Lee was being accused of abandoning. And that's why they chose him. Naratara, the rules were simple because they had to be. No one wanted lawyers. No one wanted hospitals. This wasn't sport. It was resolution. The eldest master laid it out in 4 sentences. No strikes to the eyes or groin. No weapons. Fight ends when one man can't continue or submits. You both accept. Wong nodded immediately. Bruce waited 2 seconds, then nodded once. There was no handshake, no bow. Both men understood what this was. If Bruce lost, his school would survive, but only as a private club for Chinese students, taught quietly, traditionally, in a way that erased everything he'd been building. His ideas about adaptation, efficiency, directness, they'd be filed away as the arrogance of youth. If Wong lost, the council's authority cracked, not destroyed, but questioned. And in a community held together by respect for elders and tradition, questions were corrosive. Both men had more to lose than a fight. Now at R, Wong moved first, not impulsively, deliberately. He stepped forward into a classical northern Shaolin stance, weight on the back leg, lead hand extended in a crane guard, rear hand chambered near his ribs. His posture was upright, mobile, ready to shift. Bruce didn't mirror him. He dropped his weight slightly, shoulders forward, lead hand low and loose. It looked like nothing. No form, no name, just position. One of the masters watching from the wall frowned. Another leaned in. They'd expected Wing Chun. Clean centerline theory. Vertical punches. Chain attacks. This wasn't that. Wong circled left. Bruce turned with him. Not chasing, just tracking. For 5 seconds, neither man committed. Then Wong tested the distance. A quick lead hand jab. Pulled back immediately, gauging reaction speed. Bruce slipped it with a minimal head movement. No block. No counter. Just evasion. Wong reset, circled again. The masters said nothing, but their eyes narrowed. Naraha. Bruce's students would later say he fought the way water moved, not because it was poetic, but because it was accurate. He didn't reject Wong's technique. He made it irrelevant. Wong threw a second jab, faster, followed by a low snapping kick aimed at Bruce's lead leg. Bruce checked the kick with his shin, absorbed the jab on his shoulder, and closed the gap in the same motion. Suddenly, they were too close for Northern Shaolin's long-range game. Wong tried to reset, stepped back, repositioned his guard. Bruce followed, not wildly, not aggressively. But now Wong's breathing shifted faster, shallower. He threw a combination double jab, cross, pivot to reset distance. Bruce slipped inside the second jab, trapped Wong's lead wrist with his left hand, and drove forward with his right shoulder pressed against Wong's chest. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't a throw. It was pressure, relentless. Forward, no pause. Wong backpedaled, tried to twist free. Bruce stayed attached like a shadow, and the six masters, silent until now, leaned forward because they realized something. Wong Jack Man wasn't losing because he was weaker. He was losing because the fight Bruce was in wasn't the one Wong had trained for. Narada, Wong's back foot hit the wall. Nowhere left to move. Bruce's hand was still controlling his wrist, and in that half-second of recognition, Wong's eyes widened. He knew. Wong Jack Man tried to circle off the wall. Bruce didn't let him. The moment Wong shifted his weight to pivot left, Bruce stepped with him, not blocking the path, but occupying the space Wong needed to recover. Their bodies were less than a foot apart. Wong's classical stance, designed for range and technical precision, had nowhere to express itself. He threw an elbow. Bruce tucked his chin, absorbed it on his shoulder, and drove forward again with his hips and legs, pushing Wong sideways along the wall. One of the masters stood up. He didn't say anything. He just stood. Narrato. Wong reset his feet, tried to create separation with a palm strike aimed at Bruce's chin. Bruce's left hand intercepted at the wrist. Not a hard block, just contact control. His right hand followed immediately, a short, straight punch that snapped into Wong's solar plexus. Not theatrical. Not big, but accurate. Wong's breath hitched. His posture collapsed inward for a fraction of a second. That was all Bruce needed. He stepped through, both hands now trapping Wong's lead arm, and swept Wong's front leg with his shin. Wong went down, not thrown, not slammed, just down. His back hit the concrete with a flat, dull sound that silenced the room completely. Now, Bruce didn't follow him to the ground. He stood over him, hands still loose, breathing steady. Wong rolled onto his side, tried to push himself up. Bruce waited. Wong got to one knee, looked up, and in his eyes, there was no anger. No defiance, just the recognition that this was over. He stayed on one knee. Bruce stepped back. Narata. From the first movement to the moment Wong hit the floor, 20 seconds, maybe less. No one had counted. No one had filmed it. There were no records, no referees, no official documentation, just 6 witnesses who had come to restore order and now sat in stunned silence. The eldest master finally spoke. His voice was quiet. Almost too quiet. Enough. Bruce turned to face him. Wong remained on one knee, breathing hard, one hand pressed against his ribs. The eldest looked at Wong, then back at Bruce. You've made your point. Bruce didn't smile, didn't bow, didn't offer a hand to help Wong stand. He simply said, I teach what works. The eldest's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Now, one by one, the masters stood. None of them congratulated Bruce. None of them apologized. They moved toward the exit in silence, their faces unreadable. Wong Jack Man finally rose to his feet, still catching his breath. He looked at Bruce once, just once, then followed the others out. Bruce stood alone in the center of the basement. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. His knuckles weren't bruised. His breathing was calm, and in the hollow quiet that followed, something fundamental had shifted. Not just in that room, but in everything Bruce would build after. Narata. He didn't celebrate. He didn't call his students. He didn't tell Linda the details until later that night, and even then, he spoke about it the way someone describes fixing a broken machine. They wanted to see if it worked, he said. And it worked. But privately, in the weeks that followed, Bruce replayed that fight in his mind hundreds of times. Not with pride, with criticism, because 20 seconds wasn't fast enough, and Wong had gotten back up. That bothered him. Not because Wong was tough, but because Bruce realized his technique, rooted in Wing Chun, adapted through practice, still had gaps. Too much chasing. Too much effort. Not efficient enough. Not finished. Narita, the council, never returned, but the fight had just begun. For 3 days, no one spoke about what happened in the basement. Not publicly. Not in the tea houses where the elders gathered. Not in the quoons where students trained. Not even in the grocery stores where gossip usually moved faster than goods. The silence wasn't respect, it was calculation. Narita. On the 4th day, a student at Bruce's school asked him directly, "Sifu, did you really fight Wong Jack Man?" Bruce was adjusting the wooden dummy in the corner. He didn't stop. "Yes." "Did you win?" Bruce tightened the last bolt, tested the arm with a palm strike. "I'm still teaching." That was all he said, but the student told another student, and that student told someone outside the school. And within a week, the story had spread through Oakland's martial arts community like water through cracked pavement, except no two versions matched. Narita. Some said Bruce had knocked Wong out cold in under a minute. Others claimed Wong had lasted 3 rounds and only stopped because the masters intervened. A few insisted the fight had been inconclusive, that both men had walked away with mutual respect and no clear victor, but none of the 6 masters confirmed anything, and Wong Jack Man said nothing at all. Narrator. 2 months later, Wong gave his first interview. It was brief, controlled, published in a small Chinese language newspaper that most non-Chinese readers never saw. In it, Wong described the fight as lasting several minutes. He said it had been a serious match, but not a street brawl. He claimed there had been no clear winner and that he had left on his own terms. He never mentioned being on the ground. He never mentioned 20 seconds. And he never explained why, if the fight had been inconclusive, the council had never returned to Bruce's school. Narita. Years later, when Bruce Lee became famous, when his films played in theaters across the world, Wong Jack Man was asked about the fight again. By then, the story had grown into legend. Some versions claimed Bruce had fought 10 men. Others said Wong had brought weapons. A few insisted the fight never happened at all. Wong's response was always the same. It was a private matter. It's been exaggerated. He never said Bruce lost. He never said Bruce won. He just said it was exaggerated. But in every interview, in every retelling, one detail remained consistent. Wong Jack Man never challenged Bruce Lee again. Linda Lee, Bruce's wife, would later write that the fight changed him, not emotionally, not spiritually, technically. In the weeks after the basement, Bruce stopped teaching Wing Chun forms altogether. He stopped emphasizing classical stances. He began obsessing over efficiency, economy of motion, directness. He started training differently, longer cardio sessions, more sparring, less repetition of kata. He brought in training partners from boxing gyms, wrestlers, judoka. He asked them to attack him honestly, not with respect, not with control. He wanted to know what didn't work, and he cut it out. One night, a student found him alone in the school, practicing a single technique over and over, a straight lead punch from a fencer's stance. "Sifu, what style is that?" Bruce stopped mid-motion. "It's not a style," he said. "It's what works." The student didn't understand. Bruce didn't explain. He just kept practicing. Narita. The 6 masters never formally acknowledged the fight. They didn't issue apologies. They didn't retract their challenge. They simply stopped interfering. Bruce's school stayed open. His non-Chinese students kept training. And slowly, quietly, the traditional community stopped talking about him as a problem. Not because they agreed with him, but because challenging him had proven nothing except that tradition alone wasn't enough. Narita. Wong Jack Man opened his own school in San Francisco a year later. He taught Northern Shaolin in the traditional way. Clean forms, precise techniques, respectful discipline. He never mentioned Bruce Lee in his advertising. He never used the fight to build his reputation, and when students asked him about it, he gave the same answer every time. It was a long time ago, but he never said it didn't matter. By 1967, Bruce Lee had stopped calling what he taught Kung Fu. He had a new name for it, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. Not a style, not a system. A philosophy built on one principle: use what works, discard what doesn't. His students asked where it came from. He never mentioned the basement. But everyone who had been there, who had seen him move, who had watched him strip away everything decorative, knew Jeet Kune Do wasn't born in a book. It was born in 20 seconds on a concrete floor. Narata, the basement itself is gone now. The building was renovated in the 1980s. The grocery store closed. The second floor became office space. The basement was sealed off, repurposed, then forgotten. No plaque marks the location. No historical society preserves it. But former students still visit the block. They stand on the sidewalk, look up at the windows, and try to imagine what it felt like to walk down those stairs knowing 6 men were waiting to end your career. Some of them bring their own students. They don't tell the story like a fairy tale. They tell it like a lesson. Naratoa, in 1972, a journalist asked Bruce why he didn't teach traditional forms anymore. Bruce leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "I used to," he said. "Then I got in a fight that should have lasted 5 seconds. It took 20. That was 19 seconds too long." The journalist laughed, thought it was a joke. Bruce didn't smile. "I realized I was carrying too much," he continued. "Techniques I'd never use. Stances that looked good but slowed me down. Respect for methods that didn't respect reality. So you abandoned tradition. I abandoned waste." Naratoa Wong Jackman never stopped teaching. He remained in the Bay Area for decades, running his school with quiet dignity. He taught his students the forms he had learned, the techniques that had been passed down, the lineage that mattered. He was, by all accounts, a good teacher, respectful, patient, traditional, and he never spoke ill of Bruce Lee. But in private conversations, former students recall him saying something once, years after the fight, when someone asked why he didn't modernize his curriculum. "Some of us," Wong said, "believe that preservation is more important than innovation." He paused. Bruce believed the opposite. Another pause. Maybe we were both right. Bruce Lee died in 1973. By then, the story of the basement fight had become myth, retold, reshaped, exaggerated in every direction. Some versions made Bruce a superhero. Others made Wong a villain. A few tried to erase the fight entirely, but the people who were there, the 6 masters, the few students who heard about it firsthand, they remembered it differently. Not as a triumph, not as a tragedy, as a turning point. The moment a young instructor stopped defending a style and started building a truth. Naratoa in 1998. Wong Jackman gave his final interview about the fight. He was in his 60s by then, retired, still teaching occasionally, but mostly watching his students teach their students. The interviewer asked the question everyone had asked for 30 years. Did Bruce Lee really beat you in 20 seconds? Wong looked out the window for a long time. Then he said, "Time doesn't matter. What matters is what he did after." "What do you mean?" "He didn't celebrate. He didn't brag. He went back to his school and tore apart everything he knew." Wong folded his hands. "That's why he became Bruce Lee." "Adieu." Wong smiled, just slightly. "I stayed Wong Jackman." Nara. Today, Jeet Kune Do is taught in over 40 countries. Bruce Lee's films are studied in film schools. His philosophy is quoted by athletes, artists, entrepreneurs. And somewhere in every speech about adaptability, efficiency, or rejecting dogma, there's an echo of a basement in Oakland, a place where 6 men tried to preserve the past, and 1 man proved the future wasn't negotiable. Narrator. The fight lasted 20 seconds. The lesson is still unfolding.